when these massive multi-trillion-dollar stimulus bills are being considered, there's a lot of fear that a number of different industries, their lobbyists in DC, are sort of lurking in the shadows and trying to get the interests of the people that they support to be prioritized. We've already seen evidence of that in some of the past bills, and now we have reason to believe that we should be cautious about upcoming efforts as well. And joining us to break down one area of this is investigative reporter for TYT. Welcome back to the show, Ti-Hua Cheng. Good to have you here.
Good to be here. Nice to see you, John.
So
Good haircut.
Thank you very much, and yours as well. We're trying to keep it as professional as we can under the conditions we're in. So you had an article recently, Wall Street and Big Oil see a Democratic compromise on fossil fuel bailout. Can you explain basically what you described in the article?
What happened was basically a high asset private client report that they give out to the super rich. And what it was a meeting between the biggest lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., Akin Gump, with Morgan Stanley, the giant investment firm. Mm-hmm. And they had a private tele-meeting, basically over the phone. I think 5 members from Akin Gump, including former Congressman from Texas, Lamar Smith, a big climate change denier, huge fossil fuel supporter. And also on the other side, they had 9 members from the Morgan Stanley equities and dealing with North American oil and gas. And what they discussed basically was going over what can we do to get a bailout for oil and gas. And so it was an inside look, and it included in the report a link to the audio of this meeting. Mm-hmm. And it's so basically it's a look at, it's like being the fly on the wall in one of these really high level meetings where they're really pretty open talking about what they plan to do. And the essence of it was, let's give basically do a barter. Let's give the renewables the tax credits we took away that they got under the Obama administration, and in exchange, let's get some stuff for the oil bailout, like buying oil for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And so they were very blunt about it, and they even talked about opening up the economy. They said ultimately that's the only way we're going to save the oil and gas is opening up the economy. And they had no discussion about how many people would die. They didn't mention that at all. So it was basically a very blunt meeting. It's the kind of meeting you don't really usually get access to. So it's sort of like a fascinating look at how the big boys are operating, in the sense that these are the big money people meeting with big oil lobbyists. This particular firm, Akin Gump, is the largest. They describe themselves as the largest lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., but they also represented in the most recent filings both ExxonMobil and Chevron, wow, 2 of the biggest oil companies in the world and the biggest one in the United States. And they paid them $50,000 each to the Akin Gump for their lobbying efforts. So they basically were very honest with each other, opening and talking about, even with a sense of humor, about one of their members, the Akin Gump team, who used to work for Senator James Inhofe, from Oklahoma, a big, huge oil and gas supporter, and someone close to Harold Hamm, who donates a lot of money to Donald Trump. And Ryan Smith said Ryan said that they were laughing that he wears a cowboy hat. Mm-hmm. And then they got to talking about, what can we do to save oil and gas? And so that was an inside look. And I asked Congressmember Nanette Barragan, who's from California, from the LA area, and represents the LA area. And I asked her to comment on this. And she did give us a comment back saying that it was basically unconscionable that they would be discussing using money that's supposed to go to help families and workers and small businesses to recover, to use that to help giant oil and gas industries, basically pay off their debt and make more profit. So that was it was a good, and she is the lead sponsor, along with 4 other Democrats, of the lead introducer, along with 38 Democrats who have co-sponsored the Rewind bill. The Rewind bill is basically designed to counteract everything the Trump administration has done that's anti-environment, from the EPA to Department of Interior oil leases to giving out money from the stimulus for oil and gas. Yeah. And she's key sponsor of that. So it was good that she also recognized, or at least recognized the importance of this meeting, that this was an inside look at their game.
Well, I'm glad that there are people inside that are watching out for this. So what I want to talk about a little bit is the tactics. So it seems like what you're saying is they're not expecting necessarily at these oil companies to just be handed a bunch of money in the stimulus directly. That's why they're looking for other tactics where money can be routed to them, but perhaps can be pitched as, being concerned with national security or something like that, right? They don't expect to just be handed a lump sum of billions of dollars.
Right, because there's been too much opposition by Democrats and by environmentalists against that, and by people, because they've been writing in to Congress and complaining and excuse me, and emailing. And so, but they have done things, for example, like the Federal Reserve made a new ruling just this week saying that the loans that are intended to help small and mid-sized businesses survive, to be able to pay their bills and actually survive this pandemic, that money can be used by oil and gas companies, any companies, to pay off debt. And that in particular helps oil and gas companies, in particular shale oil companies, because they went into a lot of debt in the last number of years. They actually were drilling just to pay off debt in some cases. Mm-hmm. So for them to be able to use Federal Reserve loans to pay off debt is in a way a bailout. Yeah. That's not the name they use for it, but that's actually what it is in a way.
Exactly. Well, and they seem to be pitching it internally as it being that. Well, one of the things I'm curious about is obviously we saw in the initial economic falling apart as the pandemic started to spread, that some of these fossil fuel companies were particularly hard hit, and that the troubles they were having had secondary effects that hurt other industries too. And it seemed as if they were sort of a force multiplier for the damage that these sorts of issues can cause to the economy. And in response, early on, there were some individuals, like I think Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who were saying that this is an indication that we need to be working on some sort of, it might have actually been some climate change activists that I follow, but that this is an indication that we need to start talking about some sort of medium or long-term winding down of these industries, that as long as they exist, they're not only, for instance, like with the pandemic, contributing to lung problems that make the pandemic more fatal, but also that they are doing additional damage to the economy, and that if we just return to the status quo, that will still linger around for the next pandemic. As you're talking to these representatives, it's good to know that they're on the watch for these attempts to bail out the industries, but are there any larger, more forward-looking conversations about what might need to be done akin to some of the reforms that happened with Wall Street during the last recession?
Yes, I think that's part of the problem. The progressive Democrats are pointing out that the more centrist Democrats are basically ignoring the environment. At each stimulus, we're on the fifth stimulus bill now that they're voting on in the House today. And each one of the stimulus bills, they've said, okay, the next one, we're going to have something for renewable energy sources. Yeah. The next one. Now we're already on the fifth, and there isn't anything. And the argument is, well, we've got to recover the economy, put everything we can in. And that's not how one should really recover the economy, because this is a good opportunity, unfortunately, through a pandemic, a deadly pandemic, where it's a good opportunity to wake up, basically, and smell the coffee, smell what's going on. We need to change the way we're consuming. We need to change the way we're creating energy. And this is a good opportunity to do that, because if we're putting in trillions of dollars into businesses like fossil and fuel or any other businesses to survive, we can also put in trillions of dollars into renewable energy. Because once that's done, those are energy sources that are permanent. And then, at least 20 years without having to put in extra money. And that's the way for the country to recover. Building them will create a lot of jobs and also do a lot for the economy. In fact, there was one economist from Columbia who said, had we put in the money that we put into 2008 and 2009 Great Recession, that money, if it had been put in renewables, would have actually produced more jobs and created more for the economy than it did just supplying it directly to companies. Because a lot of the companies just use the money to buy back their stock. This time, the Democrats are pushing against that, saying, no, you can't do that. Yeah. You can't use it just to buy back your stock. But yes, that is a big concern. And, Bernie Sanders pointed out that, it's going to take $16 trillion for the Green New Deal. Joe Biden says his Green Deal is $1.7 trillion. From what I've seen, the reality is it's going to be a lot closer to what Bernie said, if not even higher than what he said of $16 trillion. But you got to start somewhere, and that will be a big expense. But right now we've lost within the renewable energy sources, the energy companies, they've lost hundreds of thousands of employees to layoffs. So all the gains made in the last 5 years for renewable energy companies have now been lost in terms of the workforce. They've been laid off. Nobody's talking about that. They're all keep talking about, and certainly we should talk about the layoffs in the fossil fuel because they can be transitioned to other, other industries, but no one's talking about those who are already in the renewable energy industries. 17.2% of the energy created in the United States this first quarter into April was from renewable energy sources in this order: hydropower, wind, solar, and then geothermal in that order. And then coal was only 17.1%. That's the first time that's ever happened. Coal 12 years ago generated 50% of the energy of the electricity in the United States. So, and the other thing I didn't get to say was that the fossil fuel companies themselves and their analysts are already saying to the fossil fuel companies, it's time to start investing in renewables, that they need to transition. They're saying that for their own survival as a company, they need to start transitioning. Everyone recognizes the transition is happening, but they're trying to slow it down so they can make as much short-term profit as they can, which in the long term, doesn't help any of us.
Okay, that's potentially a good sign. Thank you for adding that.
Take care.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.